What were the warning signs before someone you know killed themselves? My older sister had failed attempts, was obviously depressed, and then suddenly she was okay. For months. Happy-go-lucky and a normal sibling. Then at Christmas she was happy but quiet. Sat back and observed a lot. Told me she was taking it all in and wanted lots of family photos. She ended her life 2.5 weeks later. Looking back now 18 years later, it seems so obvious to me in adulthood. How could the adults not have noticed? I remember one of my classmates who had been struggling with severe depression suddenly became very jolly and smiled at all of us. We were so happy and thought she had finally found a way to be happy again. It was a sudden and noticeable change, but sadly, she didn't come to school the next day, and we later found out she had ended her life. My mom asked for a hug when I was 14. At that age, I was like, "Nobody touches me." She insisted for the hug. I hugged her. It was the last time I saw her. I'm kinda good with it now, but for 2 decades I was like, I should have guessed something was wrong. Someone who has been struggling and seemed sad suddenly seems uncharacteristically happy. It could be they have decided to actually go through with suicide, so whatever issues and problems they had are, in their mind, solved. There was this class clown in high school that I didn't really know, but we connected over a single deep conversation about our abuse in an Asian household. And he always joked about how severely his dad beat him. Fast forward a few years, and I randomly see him at the gym, where he was really happy to see me and asked if we could talk about something serious over the weekend. I apologized, letting him know I was heading back to college the next day, but we could catch up next time. His funeral was a week later. I always think what might have happened if we just talked. He never really opens up about personal things, jokester as he is, so I really should have taken his serious ass to heart. They stopped making plans. No vacation plans. No holiday plans. No longer wanting to see that movie you have been planning on seeing since you saw the previews. They are doing that because they don't think they will be around for it. Then they will stop going to standing plans, like the game night you do once a month, or that brunch you do every other week. They are doing that because they want you to get used to the idea of them not being there anymore. They also might start having a very minimalist lifestyle. They aren't buying things that you know they need or know they have wanted because they don't think they will be around to use it. You've known someone that had mental health issues for decades? Earlier on the day they passed, they went to get a nice haircut and wore their best clothes, which was really odd because they never cared about their appearance, but no one really thought much of it. This is going to sound messed up, but I was straight up told about a month before it happened. And I understood. My friend was terminally ill, couldn't keep working and couldn't afford medical bills, but he knew I would take it the hardest. So I was told in no uncertain terms, and I had no choice but to just understand his position and be there for him. And even though I would rather have my friend back more than anything, I am grateful he was honest with me and didn't hide it. My friend killed herself. There was no warning. I think she did it within 10 minutes of deciding. Sometimes people act on impulse, and they make mistakes that can't be undone. I've been suicidal many times since then, but I've always given myself 3 days to change my mind, and so far I have every time. If she'd done the same, maybe she would still be here. None. Someone I worked with did it a few years ago. They had what outside observers might call normal levels or slightly higher levels of depression than some people due to events in their life, but nothing that made anybody suspect they were capable or wanted to do that. A friend of mine who's a psychiatrist once told me that most times when people do it, they do it pretty quickly and randomly. It's not really something they plan. Those who talk about it or discuss thinking about it, he said at least, typically are asking for help by telling people they're thinking about it. Unfortunately, stress and depression are a lot more common than a lot of people realize. If you feel like someone you know is having issues, it doesn't hurt to discreetly ask them if anything is going on or if there's any way you can help them or find help for them. Giving away their stuff. He died with new contacts, a new haircut, and clothes still in the washer and dryer. People that have been at rock bottom for so long typically die on the way up, not the way back down. They try to be normal, they don't feel normal, and they say fuck it. He was my brother, and I miss him every day, but I'm so thankful he found peace. I just wish he could have found it in the same timeline as me. He began to isolate from everyone that he knew. He was autistic and schizophrenic, so most of the time his mental health was not great. After middle school, I feel like there weren't many times that he wasn't showing some signs of poor mental health. I did find out, though, that when he left for college when he was 20, he would just sit in his dorm room and not talk to anyone else. He hadn't reached out to me, so I was unaware that he was struggling at the time. I will always remember the days that we were children, playing with sparklers on the 4th of July, and messing around in class and at church. Rest in peace, 2 hearts. A good friend of mine deleted all of his social media and withdrew himself. He overdosed almost exactly 4 years ago. He reached out to me on Discord about 2 weeks before he passed, but I never saw it as I didn't have Discord at the time. That part still messes me up. They isolated themselves and stopped attending classes. My friend disappeared for a full weekend. He checked into a hotel. Looking back on it, I think he had planned to take his life then, but he didn't. Then a few weeks later, he purposefully visits all of our close group of friends, looking back to say goodbye. I still remember him sitting only my sofa, and I still wonder if there's anything else I could have said or done. It was over 20 years ago, and still feels like yesterday. One thing that shocked me in the aftermath was the number of people who had been affected by someone they love or care about taking their own lives. I make sure now that everyone I care about knows. Documenting a list of important tasks which may take weeks/months to complete. Once the last item was complete, they suicide. My father knew that was a warning sign and hid it from the family. He left it with his note to us, apologizing for suiciding when he promised that he would never do that to us. His father and grandfather had also suicided, and he had found them both, and luckily, I do not exhibit the same depressive of anxious behavior they did. There weren't any. My best friend and I talked almost daily through texts and social media. Then one day randomly I got a phone call that he was gone. I was literally in the process of taking pictures of some Warhammer minis I wanted to show him when I got the call. I wish there were signs so I could reach out and be there for him more or do something. I know it's not my fault, but the guilt still gets to me. If you're ever thinking about doing something like that, please reach out to anyone. Even if you've only known that person a couple of days, or you used to be friends a long time ago. Please reach out. I miss you, Sam. More than anything in my life won't be the same without you. I have a few friends that have taken their own lives, and aside from depression, there really weren't any, and everyone just thought that they would be okay like always. Opie, I am sorry that you even have to ask this question. That is all I have to say. I hope you are okay, whatever aisle you are on. I cleaned out my entire apartment top to bottom, so it would be easier for my family to empty it out when I was gone. That was almost 2 years ago, and I'm glad it didn't work out. When they start isolating themselves, then all of a sudden they are upbeat, like hugging everyone and so happy. It's the sign that they gave up. That's the last goodbye to the world and to their family and friends. One time I was in the car with my grandma. Next I know, she's going like 125 on Route 66. She's laughing and giggling while 12-year-old me was in front passenger seat. She didn't end up killing herself, but soon later she got really close to that. Ended up calling the cops on her to save my baby brother. Increased isolation, drastic mood changes, and talking about feeling hopeless or being a burden. I lost one of my very best friends 9 years ago to this day, actually, and this is the first Reddit post I see today. Wild. He had a bad pill problem after a pretty serious injury. I don't think any of us knew how far he had slipped away until it was too late. I do remember one thing. He and his wife had recently bought a boat, and Brandon had no urge to take it out, ever. He also stopped driving at some point. That was a little odd, but I guess a good thing given how much medication he was on. Anyways, I miss him dearly, and I will never forgive myself for not being a better friend to him in the end. F***K, it's too early for tears. He went through this phase of getting his affairs in order, even meeting with his estranged family. I thought he was just finally getting his life back on track. Nope, he was just wrapping things up before he finished things for good. Usually, I'm gonna kill myself is the earliest indicator, usually said long in advance and laughed off. Then the other behaviors start to come in. Basically, don't dismiss the I'm gonna kill myself. Withdrawal, drastic mood changes, and expressions of hopelessness can be key indicators. I lost a few to obvious signs: drugs, alcohol, recklessness. But there was one who showed no signs at all. I thought he was a totally happy dude. He had it all. He was found hanging in his closet at college, and I never knew he was in pain. I feel like I failed. Isolating, talking less, eating less, depressed, trying to hide. Minimum presence, no friends, less contact with family. When someone asks, "Are you okay?" the other party says, "Okay, yeah," or "I am fine." Small talks. All above are the signs of other party being at lowest of his or her life. Exception. If other party was always like above from childhood, then she will act opposite in front of others. Unusual behavior and sometimes mental breakdown between conversation are also key points for consideration. My partner killed himself in March. There were no warning signs, but I was concerned because he was going to go to prison for a long time, 20+ years. I asked him if he was going to kill himself, and he said no. Mid-February, he disappeared. A month later, he killed himself on the other side of the world, in a country we have no ties to. Today, I went through the hiking backpack that was found with his body. It took several months to get his belongings back to Australia from France. It was obvious he'd planned the suicide trip for a while. He had clothes, toiletries, a new passport, a sleeping bag, and a tent. Although that was unused, who can sleep in a tent in a European winter? So there were no signs. He went to great lengths to hide his plans and portray life as normal. My then-fiancée's mother was overly affectionate and kind with me. She was never horrible or anything before this. That night was just different. She was touching my hair and telling me how nice it was, how pretty I was, how glad she was her son had me, and hoped we'd always be happy together, etc. Just in very high spirits, but in a really toned down, chilled kind of way. I thought she was just a little tipsy. She suffered with drinking and had drunk some before we had arrived that evening. It's been 8 years now, and I still think about it. He got rid of all his stuff. He just gave it away to a bunch of different people. He was going through a divorce, and people thought he was just minimizing his stuff to move, but it was because he was preparing to end his life. Being extra happy, which was really unusual and didn't make sense for years after to me. She'd made up her mind. He was the happiest I had ever seen him in months. I sat on a bus for 36 hours to visit him for his birthday. He was my best friend. The day after I went back home, he passed away. My life hasn't been the same since. I've seen this happen too. Sometimes it's the little things, like a sudden change in mood or them pulling away from friends. One friend started posting really dark stuff online and seemed super distant. It was like a light switch flipped. It's tough because you think, I should have seen it. But mental health can be so hidden. If you ever notice someone acting off, just reach out. I had a friend in high school who was a senior when I was a freshman who had just moved across the country and had to start high school knowing no one. He was the first person in that huge school to be nice to me and sat next to me on the bus every day. He was goofy and fun, outgoing and not afraid to be himself. One day on the bus, he was ruminating about being accepted to a college he'd applied to. He wanted to be an art teacher, but he also said, cryptically, "I don't really want to grow up. I just want to be a kid forever." That was the last time I talked to him. He gave some sentimental possessions away to other people, giving away personal items that normally they wouldn't have given away, but suddenly they were. There weren't any. That's the sad thing.